was talking to a friend of a friend during the 2016 primaries, and we were talking about the likely election. And I remarked, well, wouldn't it be great to have Bernie as the candidate since Trump looks like he's going to win the Republican nomination and he's running as a populist? We probably should run a populist on the other side as well, because that's the temperament of the country, right? That's where things are going. That's what the people seem to be looking for. And she said, nah, I don't want to see a populist versus a populist. And that haunted me, honestly, because she is a college-educated liberal type who has money and a good life and, you know, is pro-gay rights, but doesn't really care about poor people or black people or really anyone that's in a different class than her when you get right down to it. She's the white moderate that MLK talked about, the centrist. And the idea of populist versus populist was just gross and weird to her because it actually rendered her irrelevant, right? And there's nothing that people with power, people in upper classes hate than being ignored. Poor people are used to it, right? People who have to scrape and scrounge are used to not being heard, right? That's something that's normal for us. But for her, it was unthinkable. And that decision and that sort of idea ran through the Democratic Party. And when I say the Democratic Party, I mean like big D Democrats, people that are loyal to the party and the idea of the party. That basically doomed us because the truth of the matter was that what the country was looking for was a big change, as evidenced by the fact that third-party candidates in the 2016 election got around 4.9% of the vote total, which was up from 1.7% of the vote total in the previous election and 1.4% in the election before that. People really wanted something new and different. We didn't give it to them. What we gave them was somebody who absolutely embodied everything corrupt about the Democratic Party, everything detestable, essentially, about the Democratic Party in human form. Someone who had a record of essentially voting for the other side, working with the other side, disempowering the people, and also being a serious war hawk. It was so bad that in a number of ways, on trade, on war, etc., the Republican was actually able to run to the left of the Democrat on a lot of issues. I had a conversation with a conservative friend of mine during the primaries in 2016, two of them on the same day. And they each essentially said to me, yeah, you know, I don't really like socialists, but I kind of like what that Bernie guy is talking about, but I won't vote for that woman. I just can't vote for her. I can't do it. And that was the day that I knew we were sunk. Because no matter what anyone tells you, and like I've said many, many times on this podcast, and will continue to do so, the divides are not where we think we are. The lines are drawn between conservative and liberal, but really it's a class distinction. It's not left and right, it's top to bottom you gotta watch out for. And in not giving the bottom, the great mass of people, a contest that they were really inspired about, unless of course they were the lunatic fringe, people like David Duke who were just super excited to have a person like 45 running. But there was no one on the left who was extremely excited except for the identitarians, except for the college-educated and well-off liberals who wanted nothing more than to see a woman become president. And don't get me wrong, the idea of having a woman president is amazing, and the fact that we have not had one is detestable and galling. The fact that we have not had a woman president puts us behind so many other countries. I mean, half the people in the world, slightly more, I believe, are women. Why? Why should there not be a more even distribution of leadership? That doesn't make sense, especially in a supposedly democratic republic. But I also lived through Obama's rise, and I learned through the bitter, bitter lessons of his presidency that identity meant nothing next to policy. While I might like to have someone who looks like me or who sounds like me, sometimes you don't get that. And sometimes the person that does match your identity doesn't match your policy, doesn't match your heart. So it behooves us, especially right now, to look past identity and identity politics. Often the term identity politics is used by the right as a cudgel to refuse to discuss the very important issues of sex and gender and race. And that's not the way that I mean it. How I mean it is that when identity is the only important thing or the most important thing, then you have a problem. Because what a person looks like, representation, is never going to be more important than what they're actually going to do. then their record, then their trustworthiness, then the amount of work they will put in and the type of work they will put in. So now that we've laid out a little bit of the ins and outs of how we've gotten to now, let me give you a few tips for debunking common misgivings or outright smears you will hear about Bernie Sanders, because you're going to need them in the upcoming weeks.